This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Ron Rohde, Kentucky Afield's first host back in 1953. Now, I'm proud to present Charlie Baglan.
Snow, deer, holly, ivy, the Christmas tree. Our holiday traditions just wouldn't be the same without our wild outdoors. This show originally aired in 2013, featuring a nice lady still alive in our hearts, Laurie Davison, who once headed the Salato Wildlife Education Center, and folklore expert Brent Bjorkman at Western Kentucky University. The wildlife and folklife of Christmas, next on Kentucky Afield Radio.
Getting back to nature? Remember those already there. This holiday season, buy and print the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife gift certificate right from your PC for anyone on your list who has outdoor adventure on theirs. Online at fw.ky.gov.
Once there were three wise men. They were the travelers of their day. They traveled far and at night, using only the stars to guide their way. They never got a ticket or caused crashes. It was a miracle. But come to find out, they were never really in the dark at all. It's an age-old story that still applies when you give the gift of driving wise. A holiday wish for safe travels from your Kentucky Office of Highway Safety.
Christmas means deer season in more ways than one. Have the Jolly Reindeer drop off the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife gift certificate, perfect for anyone on your list who has hunting on theirs. Find it at fw.ky.gov.
Kentucky Afield Radio, my name is Charlie Baglan, and Merry Christmas to you, just days away now. Everywhere you turn on the radio or on the TV, there's another Christmas special playing. This is one more, but just like we have always done with Easter or Halloween, we talk about how wildlife and nature play into our celebrations. Deer, holly, ivy, the Christmas tree, snow. Christmas customs have evolved over time. Cultures, our ancestry, our heritage, our hunting, our gardening, living off the land. They have all played into how we experience this holiday. In the studio to help unwrap some of these details of behind the scenes with Christmas are Laurie Davison and Brent Bjorkman. And Laurie, tell me a bit about your position with the Salato Wildlife Education Center.
I am the manager of the Salato Wildlife Education Center in Frankfort, which is essentially a zoo that houses a variety of Kentucky native wildlife. And really cool place.
You have a lot of school kids every year, like the hundreds of thousands.
Tons of school kids, yes.
So education is the name of the game there at Salato.
Absolutely.
And Brent Bjorkman at Western Kentucky University. Tell me a little bit about your position with the Kentucky Folklife program.
The Kentucky Folklife program has as its mission to document, present, and also conserve the traditional arts, traditional culture, and heritage of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So we do things like create radio programs about the tradition from the documentation that we do with various groups and people and communities throughout the state. Could be about music, could be about art, could be about occupations that are traditional that people do. So it's really to celebrate and hold up these things, these pieces of traditional culture that aren't really talked about, let's say like in the history books and that sort of thing. It's really based in community, stories from community.
A lot of word of mouth.
Absolutely. It is word of mouth. That's right.
You are with the name Bjorkman. I'm going to spell that, Bjorkman.
Yes.
You were telling me before the show that means birch, as in wood or tree?
Bjork means birch, yes, like the tree. And I was thinking, wow, that's apropos here that we're on a fish and wildlife type show. But
Bjorkman, as folks around here would say, you're probably from out of town.
Yes, right. You're not from around here.
Where are you from?
Actually, I grew up in Minnesota, in the north upper Midwest.
And, Laurie, you're from South Carolina.
Yes.
That's a pretty good place to start talking about Christmas traditions, because I'm curious, for as many things as there are alike about Christmas wherever you go, at least in the United States, you have the Christ child story, Mary and Joseph. You have the Santa Claus and the candy canes, the Christmas tree, and all that story. As much as these stories persist across the nation, there are differences regionally. Do either one of you notice differences in the way Christmas is celebrated in Kentucky versus where you all grew up?
I would say for myself it's very similar, but I also, even though I grew up in South Carolina, my parents are Yankees, so we've got a mix of stuff that my family did, but our neighbors growing up had very distinct Southern traditions. Like one of the meals that would show up at the feast pretty regularly was shrimp and grits. So
shrimp and grits.
Not what you think of as your traditional Christmas feast, but it's awful good.
Well, I know this one thing about northern South Carolina, what they call the upstate.
Yes.
Not much snow there.
No.
You get a little bit of snow in Kentucky, not always on Christmas, unfortunately.
No, but it's one of the reasons I moved to Kentucky. I wanted more snow.
Brent, where you're from, a white Christmas, I'm going to say, is commonplace.
Oh, yeah, it's white there right now. I'm almost positive. But, yeah, absolutely. It was always most often a white Christmas. I come from as my name will tell you, I would imagine, if you know, a Scandinavian, Lutheran Scandinavian. So, church was very important. I mentioned, I think last week when we talked, Christmas really centers around a lot, coming together and the food traditions. And, that's what Laurie alluded to, the shrimp and grits. And all these things are very ethnically and regionally based, too. Think about shrimp and grits, and, you're closer to the coast and closer to southern foodways grits, where I grew up in a Scandinavian household where there was a lot of things like Swedish meatballs, but also this dried cod that's called lutefisk that was reconstituted, and it was a little bit maybe like gefilte fish almost, something that a lot of people do not enjoy, but the nostalgia for foodways, even if people, it resonates with you, and just the idea that it's an object that talks about our own heritage, it's on the table. And I think that's one of the things as a folklorist that, how do you tell people? They say, well, do I have folklore? Well, everybody has folklore, and one way during the seasons to really think about what is folklore is, think about it if something on your Christmas table or part of your celebrating at the home site in the community, what if it was missing? What if it wasn't there that year and you would be yearning and desiring for that? It could be maybe the Christmas tree moved from downstairs to upstairs, and that's never been done before. Or you get married, and in the instance of myself, my wife's people are from Alabama, and they open their Christmas presents on Christmas Day. Well, in my mind, it was everyone opens them on the 24th, and there's a few Santa presents on the 25th. They do it all on the morning. So, folklore is dynamic. We had to negotiate those things in our new household. So I think that's part of what people need to know, that what they do, and it's very intimate and almost very family-centered, and those are the precious things that we take away from life, from community, but also from this time of year.
I'm thinking Christmas, when you open presents, when you have your big family meal, will almost vary from house to house to house on your street. Almost. I grew up, and I think it was because my mother wanted to sleep in. We went to the Catholic Church, and at midnight, we would come in, and it was 1 a.m, and we did this midnight mass, and she would say, Santa Claus came while you were away, and I was just a little kid, and I bought it, and we would be up till 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And then to sleep in all the rest of the day, and she didn't have to worry about getting up early, bringing out presents from under the bed.
Your mother's a smart woman.
That's exactly right.
We talk about, in Kentucky, a down-home country Christmas. I think I have heard Kenny Rogers sing a song by that title. Brent, what is a down-home Kentucky Christmas? Down-home really country Christmas is really, it kind of goes back to this nostalgia thing. It's about homecoming, coming back down home. And if you think about it as a direction, it's very similar to the folks that, for financial reasons had to do that exodus to the north to maybe work in Detroit or Columbus or places of that nature to, maybe leave Appalachia or maybe just leave the South for the jobs. And I think that's one of the reasons, like, well, where are you going? I'm going down home for Christmas. It's a down home Christmas. We're going to finally get together. We rarely get back there because our lives are so busy with our new communities up north. And when you get back and you get back with the kinfolk and relatives, and you're going to enjoy this particular time. So I think it's an iconic way of saying that. That's what I think. The term Norman Rockwell Christmas Norman Rockwell was a famous painter, and though he is deceased now, we still see his work. If I can use the quote, a Norman Rockwell Christmas. I hope people will know what that means. It's sort of the Christmas that, if there could be a Christmas in your mind, if you could paint a picture of Christmas, this is what it would look like.
It's the Christmas I've aimed for in my traditions, actually. That's my Christmas in my mind.
So does it exist in Kentucky? Or is it purely a mental picture? We'll talk about it when we come back. I'm Charlie Baglan. You're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. We are back in segment 2. My name is Charlie Baglan on Kentucky Afield Radio. The topic this week is Christmas, of course. Our program is talking about the picture-perfect Christmas and how nature is part of that. Laurie Davison from the Salato Wildlife Education Center and from his office in Bowling Green at Western Kentucky University, Brent Bjorkman with the Kentucky Folklife program. Snow. We see kids that play in the yard, horse-drawn sleighs. We see a table inside a nice home in the country that is full of food and people are coming to sit down and eat. Christmas tree in the corner. Does this exist as much as we think it does in Kentucky? Because the snowfall in Kentucky really doesn't provide for it. We need to have Christmas in January to have a better shot at this. The Norman Rockwell Christmas. What states, where do you have to go to find this on a consistent basis?
What state do you have to go? I think you have to go to the state of your mind in one sense, but I think the Norman Rockwell piece has really been pushed forward, I think, really by a lot of American advertising as well. I mean, It's in everything we see, from the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and you remember the Norelco commercials where he was floating and for lives and the snowman. That's kind of where you're coming from, Charlie. It's always this white, pastoral, or there's a cozy, snug home, and you look in the window and there's a table full of food. And it's part of the bounty, too, in all cultures during the harvest time, and that's when this season does fall, when all the crops are in and we finally do have time. But I think this cold weather climate really has to do with these things being created by Madison Avenue and the advertising people who've pushed it along very successfully for probably as long as we've been a nation.
And Coca-Cola is the favorite beverage of Santa Claus.
Absolutely, and it's a very southern beverage, so.
Yeah, I always, the Norman Rockwell stuff, I go to my grandparents' house because Christmas at their house, and it was a combination. The other iconic Christmas is Currier and Ives. And my grandparents lived in Vermont, and that scene in Norman Rockwell's painting of the family gathered around the table and the beautiful turkey and the peas and everything, that was the Christmas dinners. That's what we did at my grandparents' house if we visited there for Christmas. And it was very much exactly like that.
We've been talking a lot about the things we see, the Christmas tree, the snow, the greenery, the wreath on the door. These are all parts of nature, and as the show progresses, I want to get in and talk about these things, mistletoe, holly, ivy. And we'll do that, but I think it's worth a moment to talk about the origin, and I know that you all know because I kind of don't. The origin of Christmas. Now, I know the story says celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ. Mr. Bjorkman, the origin of the holiday of Christmas, it didn't start out as a religious holiday, did it?
Beginning of the 1600s, it kind of goes back to what we talked about, folklore being very dynamic and things changing over time. And this went in when as I understand it, Pope Gregory was trying to convert some of the pagan religions, maybe of the northern part of Europe, and they were really celebrating around the equinox.
First day of winter.
Absolutely. So, they had prayers and giving reverence to the living culture, and part of that was the trees of the area, the coniferous trees, which did become the Christmas. So he tried to incorporate and give them a little bit of leeway, saying, okay, well, let's work around this and try to get this idea of Christianity in, but let's not do it by overpowering them. So it was kind of a movement over time, and then eventually this became, as Christianity took over a lot of this idea of when Christmas became what it is today, it really goes back to change over time and people's traditions doing that.
I'll never forget my mother said, Christmas comes at the wrong time of the year. It's cold and people are out and they're doing this and that and they're traveling and there's snow. But she says, I think it should come in summer. But I got to thinking, in New Zealand and Australia and South Africa, it does come in summer.
It does, in the middle of summer.
I have not been there for the Christmas holiday in the Southern Hemisphere. Never have. And I don't know, I would not know how to celebrate Christmas without snow. The picture just isn't there. I can't see it in a palm tree. Have either of you seen Christmas in the summer?
I was in Ethiopia adopting my children on Christmas, and it was definitely not snowing or cold there.
That's equator. That's on the equator. It was
on the equator, so yeah, definitely not, although it did get chilly during the rainy season, but one of the days that we were there, the agency sent us all out to this neat little resort, I guess. They had this skinny guy wearing bright green, lime green running shoes, dressed as Santa Claus, and he was going around handing out little gifts, which were mostly little bags of candy and stuff like that. But I thought it was funny that Santa Claus had also made it to Ethiopia. But they have their own Christmas traditions as well. Ethiopia has the oldest Christian church there.
The Coptic Christian with that.
That's right, yeah. They have a tradition around Christmas that looks nothing like ours. It's very much religious, and the outfits that people wear, it's all white. Everybody goes to church wearing white robes and things like that. But I think there's a lot of fasting involved.
You will see differences in Christmas every country you go to.
Christmas in the summer, maybe I could stretch it to holiday. I was when I was in Alaska working as a seasonal worker there working in tourism. The National Park Service. People are seasonal workers, and they have this real bond that they have, much like a family. Of course, you spent day and night with these people during a tourist season. So they actually have a thing that's quite universal, not just in Alaska, but in a lot of the parks, is Christmas in July or Christmas in August. And they celebrate by giving each other gifts and making a big deal of it sometimes with the campers and the tourists that are around them at that particular time. Santa Claus is usually one of the veteran rangers, that sort of thing. So we do have this idea of Christmas being something that we really cherish, and we want to celebrate it with those we are intimate with and love.
Nature is a big part of Christmas. Nature is a big part of Halloween. We have a rabbit on Easter. We have flowers coming out our ears on Mother's Day. I don't know if there's nature a part of Valentine's Day, but Groundhog Day.
Flowers again. Oh, Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day is another holiday that centers around wildlife, and there is one other, Arbor Day. Maybe there are more. But Christmas certainly has nature involved in it, and this is Kentucky Afield Radio. So we should look at the nature that we use as we celebrate Christmas in Kentucky. And we can begin with the Christmas tree. What native Christmas trees are there growing in Kentucky? Laurie, do you know?
Well, the red cedar or juniper, which is what we usually used in my family. We'd go out and cut a cedar tree. There are people that use pine trees as well. We've got Virginia pines and white pines, although they're not great at holding ornaments.
Pitch pine. There's also pitch pine in this state.
Yes. Yeah.
Have you heard of hemlock trees being used as a Christmas tree?
I have heard of that, which is kind of cool, because they look a lot like a fir tree, and I would imagine they're just as good as a fir to hold ornaments, I've never actually used one.
The idea of lights on a Christmas tree, where did that come from? And the story I heard was, if you go outside at night on a clear night, you can look through the branches and the pine needles, and you can see the stars, and that sort of mimics what a Christmas tree light is. That at all close to the truth that either one of you know?
The one I've heard has to do with St. Lucia.
Yeah, St. Lucia was an Italian saint, but funny enough, she was embraced by Swedish culture. So
Okay.
It is a time and she wears a crown of lights around her head.
And they used to have parades. This was just previous to Christmas was St. Lucia Day.
That's right.
And her name, actually, the root of her name is Light, Lux.
That's right.
And they would have parades, and people would carry torches, and they would declare a woman in the village or the town to be St. Lucia for the day, and they would do this parade she'd be surrounded by people carrying torches and light. So that, to me, is a possible link to the Christmas lights.
Putting candles on a Christmas tree, on a pine tree, with all the is it turpentine that's in
pitch and
that just seems like a fire hazard waiting to happen.
Yep, it is.
And I'm sure it had to be. But I assume that you found a better way to put light on a tree and not use a candle and burn down your home.
Right.
Does that have any validity?
Yes.
Absolutely. It became the Christmas tree in homes as kind of a universal. Kind of came about with Queen Victoria when she married Prince Albert, who was a German, and it was a German that putting candles on a tree was a very a German tradition that they brought into London at that time. And then again, I think a PR mechanism went off, and people saw this and learned about this. So it became this thing that was embraced by Anglo culture, and then, of course, migrated here to the United States, where we embrace it as well. But I really like both of those stories, St. Lucia, but also probably that initial story, seeing the lights of stars through a grove of trees, too. And also just this idea of light, it's going to restore us and keep us warm during these days that could be lonely if we didn't have that. All of those are very valid and part of any particular person's belief system.
Wildlife and folk life, sides of the holidays that we don't always see in the spotlight, but they are today. In the next segment, we will talk about uses for that Christmas tree after all the decorations have been taken off. Stay with us. This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Kentucky Afield Radio. I'm Charlie Baglan. This is our show on the wildlife and folk life of Christmas. Sort of the Kentucky Afield version of White Christmas or Charlie Brown or Frosty. We air it every year because the message is timeless. It features the late and lovely Laurie Davison, who for many years ran our Salato Wildlife Education Center in Kentucky's capital city. It's always nice to hear her voice. We also welcome Brent Bjorkman, who heads the Kentucky Folklife program at Western Kentucky University in Bowling Green. Christmas trees is a good thing before, during, and after Christmas. And just like wrapping paper or gift boxes, recycling comes into play.
Yes, absolutely. And here at Fish and Wildlife, one of the big uses for Christmas trees after Christmas is fish shelter, fish habitat. We actually will send out press releases to the newspaper and say, bring us your Christmas trees. And our fisheries division is who handles this.
But this is scattered all across the state.
It is, yes.
Fish habitat, how's that work?
They take the trees and, one or more trees, depending on how big they are, and weigh them down with cinder blocks or something like that and sink them into lakes. They provide cover for smaller fish to get away from the big ones that are going to eat them, and makes them last a little longer. Fish are pretty rabidly hungry, it seems like to me. I watch them in the aquariums at work, and a bass will go through a bunch of minnows in no time flat. If you have a place for them to hide, it stretches that food source out a bit longer. It maintains a healthier ecosystem when you've got all shapes and sizes of fish in there.
So this is a good idea for your live tree, your real tree, after the holidays.
Yes.
Look around in the newspaper or call the Department of Fish and Wildlife and say, hey, are you doing a collection of these anywhere in the state, wherever you happen to live? And they'll say yay or nay. And another term for this is fish habitat, fish attractors. You'll hear that in the fishing report. Look for the fish attractors. We will give you a map of where these fish attractors are, where they put them. And that's going to be a really good place to go to drop your bait.
And that's because the big fish are hanging out around these Christmas trees where all the minnows are. It's a good place for a bunch of fish to congregate. There's going to be all sorts of variety there.
If that option isn't available, can they be mulched? What else? Firewood?
Sure, mulched. What I do with my Christmas tree, and I live in suburbia, is I drag it to the edge of the yard and I leave it there. And it provides cover for birds that are ground feeders or squirrels and chipmunks or, whatever may be out there that needs cover.
That is a smart. Just throw it in the corner in the backyard.
Yeah. And
maybe have 2, 3, 4 of these things. You just pile them up.
Absolutely. Brush piles are one of the best forms of habitat you can put in, and it's completely inexpensive. You just drag stuff together and pile it up.
Rabbits will use those, small birds.
Absolutely. All sorts of wildlife uses them.
And they'll use them year-round, not just immediately after.
Sure. In spring, it's going to be a great place for nesting or denning for raising your young.
Talking about your yard, what can you do to make Christmas more decorative just with things you will find laying around your yard? Pine cones, for example.
Oh, pine cones are great for cheap and easy bird feeders. And it's a fun thing to do with kids. You take a pine cone and some chunky peanut butter, and you can add stuff to it like raisins and things like that, maybe some nuts, crunched up nuts and things, and just fill up the space in between all the little pieces of pine cone and take it outside and hang it on a tree, and birds love it.
Doesn't have to be a pine tree. It doesn't have to be the tree it came off of.
That's right.
It's hanging on any tree, and birds will go crazy. A feast.
And it's also fun, and this is another fun thing to do with kids, especially because they don't think in these terms unless you direct them that way sometimes. All sorts of things that you'll find out in your backyard or in the woods, if you think about them right, make pretty darn good Christmas ornaments. And an example would be trumpet vine pods.
Holly. Is holly a bush, or is holly a shrub, or is it a tree? I have bushes, holly bushes in my house. Is it all three?
There are a bunch of different types of holly, and the holly lends itself well to being trimmed back, so you can make a holly be a shrub. But there are the native hollies, the deciduous holly and the winterberry holly are big producers of red fruits. They're awful pretty to have in your yard.
Holly with those red berries.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those red berries are bird food for
They're bird food, and they're very pretty as far as decoration goes as well. But, yeah, birds love them.
In my neighborhood, we had this wonderful, it was a very mature, and it was a tree. It was a holly tree. And when I moved in, I found out the neighborhood tradition, as somebody knocked on my door and said, the previous owner have always let us come and take some of your branches so we can make our wreaths and things for our door. What am I going to say? Yeah, that sounds fine.
You have to let them.
That's right. So, yeah, I love the holly. Is there something between the male and the female? I was learning a little bit, and I can't quite remember.
Yeah, they are. There are male and female trees. A lot of trees have the male and female parts all on the same tree.
Right.
Among hollies and some other species of trees out there, you have to have one of each in order to get the berries. And hollies are definitely one of those.
One of the biggest and most important piece of greenery to adorn the Christmas season, especially to lonely men. Mistletoe. Now, that is a native plant right here in Kentucky.
Yes.
We're doing this show on nostalgia in many ways. Brent, you'll like this. Back in the year 1999, it might have been the year 2000, Laurie and I did a show on the subject of mistletoe. And I want to play that for you now. Let's go back. This is the way Kentucky Afield Radio sounded back in the day.
We tiptoe through the mistletoe. Next on Kentucky Afield Radio. Few presents mean as much as a kiss. They're suitable for kids and adults alike. And although they don't come in boxes and bows, there's still a lot wrapped up in a kiss. Love, hope, trust. And depending on just who is kissing who, a kiss can be just as joyous to give as to receive. A sprig of mistletoe, in a way, is the tree under which gifts of kisses are placed. A lovely tradition, mistletoe, but kisses are needed far beyond the holidays. Regardless of how many we give or get in December, kisses don't keep. Solution? Why not extend the tradition? After all, there's an abundance of this passion plant in Kentucky if we want to try. Like holly, ivy, and even Christmas trees, mistletoe, too, is evergreen, and it grows practically everywhere.
Mistletoe is found throughout the state of Kentucky. It grows in oak trees and black walnut trees. Mistletoe is native to Kentucky. It's found all over the world, but our native species is the American mistletoe, and you can find it throughout the state.
We're talking with Laurie Davison of the Salato Wildlife Education Center in Frankfort. Actually, she says you can find mistletoe growing in any number of trees, probably as close as your backyard. And like all of Kentucky's indigenous wild plants, mistletoe too has a story. And she's more than willing to kiss and tell.
Mistletoe grows on oaks and walnuts. These are deciduous trees that lose their leaves in the wintertime. So when the leaves drop, if you look into the tree and you see a clump of greenery, that's often mistletoe.
Laurie says that while mistletoe sends a signal of warmth and embrace to you and me, mistletoe can be the kiss of death for trees.
It is a parasitic plant, so when you kiss under the mistletoe, you are kissing under a toxic parasite. The roots of the mistletoe grow down under the bark and into the branches of the tree and take nutrients from the tree. And in enough time, it may, in fact, kill the tree.
There's a mystery to mistletoe.
Although it's toxic to human beings, is very readily eaten by birds and other mammals, and so birds usually are the animal that spreads it from tree to tree.
The white berries that birds eat play into the custom. Washington Irving writes that in the 1830s, young men had the privilege of kissing young maidens only as long as berries were present. Laurie says that mistletoe has kissed the pages of history for centuries.
The Christian tradition of kissing under the mistletoe probably began around 400 AD in Ireland, but actually the tradition is much more ancient than that. The Celts considered mistletoe to be a very sacred plant, and it was used in fertility rituals.
Mistletoe cannot be grown in a flower pot. Its habitat is in trees, often far out of reach. To gather it requires a ladder, climbing, or
you go down into the woods and spread out sheets under the tree and use a shotgun and buckshot, fire up into the tree, and the mistletoe will fall onto the sheets and you can collect it there.
So mistletoe warrants more than its share of lip service, but what a place to start. Ironic that something as simple as a kiss can fill us with such worth. Perhaps more than any other native plant of Kentucky, we owe thanks to mistletoe for the gifts of kisses it guarantees. This holiday season, there is likely a kiss or two or 200 on your list. And when we give a kiss, we know that it's never the wrong size, the wrong color, or too expensive. Yet it's one gift we always hope will be returned.
Kentucky Afield Radio, the way it used to be. I have another oldie-goldie piece I want to play towards the end of the show. But using a shotgun, Laurie, to pick mistletoe sounds like a noisy affair.
It is a noisy affair.
Laurie, I want to hear, you had a story that I think you have done in recent years on a show on this topic about Lapland and the reindeer pulling the sleigh.
Yeah, the reindeer thing, if you think about it, the farther north you go, you see a lot of reindeer. Now, of course, the North Pole, there aren't any.
Those are caribou. And so they do exist. They are real animals.
They're real animals.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Something that's fun to tell kids here about reindeer is that they are the only members of the deer family in which the females also have antlers. The reason for that is that where you find reindeer, you will also find wolves that like to eat them. And
so they do have to fly.
They gotta fly. They've got to be able to defend themselves. Is what it comes down to. Now, among white-tailed deer and deer that you have here in Kentucky, elk and things of that nature, the antlers are great for self-defense. But if that's what they were there for, the females would need them too. What they're actually there for is to show off. It's a way of a male demonstrating his physical prowess, that he is mature, he's of breeding age, and he's got some nice healthy genes. A buck that's unhealthy will not have a nice rack of antlers, and that helps the females select the male that they're going to mate with.
But they actually did pull sleighs or sleds or something in Lapland.
Yeah.
They did. So they really did. That just wasn't something somebody just dreamed up to put in a story.
I think somehow just because reindeer are synonymous with Siberia and Lapland and areas like that, I think they were a more natural fit for pulling Santa's sleigh.
Holidays are certainly what we eat. And that will vary from almost state to state, house to house, depending on where you grew up and what your traditions are. But cooking for the holidays, I'm guessing one thing that is traditional, though probably not very, very much liked, is fruitcake.
I actually do like fruitcake in small doses.
I want your autograph before we leave. You are the first I've met in all these many years.
But I think, and I could be wrong about this, Brent, it's just a total theory on my part. I think that the fruitcake might be one of the ways that we sort of absorb the Yule log.
It's like re-gifting.
Yeah, you could keep them year after year. That's true. Soak them in enough brandy, you can dig them up 100 years from now.
That easily could be part of it. I think part of it, too, is, and this goes back to traditional times when we didn't have the refined sugars and the things that were readily available. So when you had the dried fruits, which were very precious. So, Charlie, I think the fruitcakes used to be a very precious and well-regarded thing. And I think that's part of our national, regional family folklore, too, is many of us have the story about the person in the family, bless their heart, to use a regional expression, that makes the fruitcake every year. And there's the obligatory, maybe it's the bite that you do, or the piece that you do, or maybe the rest goes in the freezer, or the stories around the fact that not everybody likes it, but we love her or him so much that we will take it and use it for a doorstop.
But these would be native trees, dropping the native fruits and the native nuts.
Yes.
We have been talking about Christmas as if it were a single day or a Christmas Eve and a day. Christmas seasons. There's the 12 days of Christmas. We hear that song. It's in the Epiphany, I think. What is that, Brent? The 6th of January?
Yeah.
Is that the 12th day?
That's the 12th day of Christmas. I believe that's when the Magi finally got to visit the Christ child. And I do believe that it's the three wise men finally making their approach to make that visit and to celebrate.
That's the lore. So the Christ the child, the little baby, was 12 days old when the kings finally got there to him. Right. Kings didn't get there on Christmas Day. The actual
according to this doctrine, absolutely.
Is there any significance to the first day, the second day of Christmas, the third day? Do those numbers have, are they like a code?
Well, the middle of the 16th century, as I understand it, when the Roman Catholics in England during the shift to Anglican were really not permitted to practice their faith as openly. So there became this carol as a song, first as something to say, and then it evolved into a song, and all of you know that. There's the partridge in the pear tree was a secretive way to talk about Christ, and the two turtle doves were the Old and the New Testament. And it goes on, and the 6 geese a-laying stood for the 6 days of creation. It was just a way to work around the powers that be of the time.
So you were saying 5 golden rings, but you were meaning something else. You knew it about with your fingers crossed behind your back.
Yeah.
You meant something else.
Yeah, that's right, the 5 golden rings. I'm talking about the first 5 books of the Old Testament. So it was just a way to be able to be who you were in your religion when it was during a time of persecution.
It is information just like that qualifies us to be under the education category on YouTube.com instead of limited to the normal 10 minutes that everybody else gets. Wildlife, Folklife, all a part of Christmas. Our remaining minutes are just ahead after the break. I'm Charlie Baglan, and you are listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglan. We are talking about the wildlife and folklife sides of Christmas. Laurie Davison from the Salato Wildlife Education Center is my guest, along with Brent Bjorkman from Western Kentucky University, the Folklife program. Chestnuts, roasting over open fires. You would automatically think Nat King Cole and American chestnuts, although I don't think there was American chestnuts dropping from the trees and forests like they once were.
No.
What year was that the blight came through and essentially wiped it out from ever being a tall, majestic tree like it was 150 years ago?
I don't remember the year, but I know that my grandparents remembered chestnut trees, and so it wasn't all that long ago. And that was, from a wildlife point of view, it was a huge loss. Chestnuts provided tons of mast. Mast is stuff that's hard to chew, basically, to masticate. Nuts and
walnuts.
Walnuts and things of that nature are hard mast. That was a huge food source for a lot of the wildlife.
And that fed
deer, it would have fed squirrels, it would have fed all sorts of nut-eating creatures, basically. And, fortunately, we also have oak trees and hickory trees and things of that nature that could substitute in, but the chestnut tree, that was quite a loss to wildlife.
Brent, Laurie, I sure appreciate you stopping by to talk about the wildlife and folk life sides of Christmas.
This has been fun. I'm now in the Christmas mood.
Thanks, Charlie. It was a pleasure.
Enjoyed it.
I want you to do me a favor. Have yourself a merry, big Christmas. Don't fool around with a little one. May your Christmas tree reach to the sky with lights as bright as stars. May there be caroling so loud you can hear it wherever you are. May the snowflakes beat the earth like a drum. May even tiny reindeer soar. And may Santa Claus bring you all that you want and more. Speaking of snowflakes beating the earth like a drum, I want you to hear Kentucky Afield Radio from about, 16, 17 years ago, 1999. A show we did on snow.
Signs of life in the dead of winter. It's called that for good reasons. There's not a flower abloom, and not a bee nor a lawnmower abuzz. While sleet, ice, and freezing rain may be our adversaries, most of us will welcome snow. It's the raw material for snow skiing, sled riding, snowballs, snowmen, and not to mention there's pure beauty in that pure white. Compared to summer, the snowy season may be cold and lifeless, but to wildlife and wild plants, the dead of winter is anything but.
The countryside is far from dead in the middle of the wintertime, as all these tracks that we see show us. Those are deer tracks right there in front of us, all around this line of trees. It's interesting for landowners in the wintertime. They can actually go out and see what kinds and get an idea, the numbers of animals that live on their farm. The little shrew, and they're really small, they're among nature's smallest mammals. They actually make tunnels under the snow. It's called a subnivean environment. And they'll actually live under the snow, and they can move freely without worrying about a hawk or an owl or a coyote catching them because they can't be seen. That's why sometimes you'll see a coyote or a fox with its head tilted towards the snow, and they're listening. And when they hear it, then they'll try to pounce on it.
Winter snow is like nature's own big bottle of whiteout. It covers what may otherwise be a dull, drab, but certainly not lifeless time of year. We realize as we watch animals and plants adjust and adapt, and as we watch our kids who would rather wake up to snowflakes than cornflakes, that there are things about this cold and dreary season that always receive our warm embrace. Kentucky Afield Radio is a broadcast service of the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife, your partner in the cold outdoors.
Another oldie goldie from Kentucky Afield Radio shows past. There's a new year on the horizon. Let me encourage you to make the outdoors a part of it. Do it for your kids as well as yourself. These days kids don't automatically grow up with connections to nature and wildlife that maybe we did when we were growing up. Make this the year you take them fishing or go on a camping trip. Get them involved in archery or backyard birds or bugs or build a birdhouse. And you too, for that matter. What are you doing this year that may get you more connected with the outdoors? Anything? Maybe this is the year you buy yourself a fishing license again and use the darn thing. Spring will be here before you know it. April is turkey season. Maybe you want to go canoeing this spring. Contribute to the Nature and Wildlife Fund when you fill out your income taxes this February. Buy yourself a Nature's Finest license plate when your birthday month comes around. You notice what I'm suggesting? None of this falls on January 1st. That's a big reason that half our New Year's resolutions fail. They're too grand, and they start on the wrong day. New Year's Day, it's a holiday. It's a major holiday. It's a day off, for heaven's sakes. I'm going to resolve to be lazy. Food, parades, football, you're tired from a late night before. It's not a good day to implement life-altering decisions. Don't hinge big changes on January 1st. I was reading about this. Psychologists call it cultural procrastination. Well, I could do it now, but I'll wait. I'll put it off. I'll put it off till January. If something's important, why aren't you doing it now? But maybe more importantly, do it when it makes sense. And for the most of us, January 1st isn't that day. We make this long list of things we're going to do to better our lives, and then all it winds up doing is give us false hope. It disappoints us. Why? Because we're weak? We have no follow-through? No, it's just unrealistic. And that is the number one reason New Year's resolutions fail. They are not realistic. So start your resolutions, let's say instead of January 1st, how about March 3rd? How about the 28th of May? Put it off till August when you finally go back to school. If you're changing your life for the better, you'll know when the time is right. You'll know when it fits. In fact, I've got some good news among all this preaching. You may be already ahead of the game. There may be a new habit you picked up last summer that fits your life. So keep it up. Look at all the good things you do every day to make your life successful. Did you start these things on some New Year's Day somewhere? Of course not. But you started. That's the key thing. So here's to a happy and healthy 2017, and do make the outdoors a part of it, because you will fall in love with what it gets out of you. We're out of time. This is Charlie Baglan inviting you to join us in a week, and we'll go inside outdoors again, here on Kentucky Afield Radio.